Hey guys, welcome to another video of our channel. In today's episode, we will talk about an event that, each year, becomes more symbolic and full of meanings. The Victory Day Parade, held in the Red Square, in Moscow. But this year, he was more than a simple celebration of the victory over Germany in World War II. He became a stage where Vladimir Putin's power has been reaffirmed, and a powerful message from how Russia and China are together, trying to lead the new multipolar order in the global scenario. In this video, we will analyze how Russia has used the Victory Day Parade not only as a military force display, but also as a platform for reinforcing political and geopolitical narratives, as well as affirming its position in the context of a prolonged war and without a clear end. Let's explore all this throughout this video. Victory Day, celebrated annually on May 9th, is the most symbolic date for the Russians. It marks Germany's surrender to the Soviet Union in 1945 at the end of World War II. For Russia, the event is not only a reminder of the military victory, but also a tribute to the 27 million Soviets who lost their lives during the conflict. This sacrifice, which was marked in the collective memory of the Russian people, made the Day of Victory a symbol of resistance, unity, and strength. The first parade of Victory Day took place in 1945, shortly after the Nazi defeat, in the same Red Square where today we see modern tanks and drones parading. During the Soviet time, the event was a great showcase of Soviet military power, with parades that impressed the world, displaying heavy equipment and a demonstration of unbeatable force. Each year, the parade became another milestone of power, reaffirming the dominant position of the Soviet Union on the international scene. With the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Victory Day lost part of its brilliance. The parade was no longer the great military event it was, and Russia, just lived by a serious economic and political crisis, could no longer support this grandeur. But it was with Vladimir Putin that the event was rescued, and more than that, raised to a new level. Under its leadership, the parade is no longer just a tribute to the past and became a powerful political tool for the present. From 2005, Putin began to reinstate the event as a demonstration of military strength, but also of international political alignments. What was once an exhibition of Soviet military power has now become a stage to show Russia's partnerships, especially with countries outside the Western sphere of influence. These parades have had a significant political weight, serving to send both internal and external messages about Russia's stability and role in the global scenario. The idea of using Victory Day as a tool to reinforce the power of the Russian state has become even clearer in the following years. The parade is no longer a simple commemorative event to become a carefully planned display, where every detail has a deep meaning. The goal was not only to celebrate the past, but to say to the whole world that Russia remains a military power and that its greatness must be recognized. Each year, more troops, more weapons, and more international allies became part of the parade, a symbol that Russia was not alone, and that was increasingly connected with countries that share a different worldview from that proposed by Western powers. It was in this scenario that Victory Day also became a platform for Putin to show his narratives about Russia's enemies, highlighting the accusations of neo-Nazism that have been often associated with the Ukrainian government and NATO. In 2025, the Victory Day Parade took place at a critical moment for Russia. The war in Ukraine, which has been going on for more than 2 years, remains without a clear strategic victory. Russia has faced great difficulties in achieving its military objectives, and human and economic costs increase each month. With this, the parade has become an opportunity for Putin to reaffirm its power and send a clear message. Russia is still a great military power, and the war in Ukraine is a fair struggle necessary to protect the Russian homeland from a threat that, according to him, would be represented by modern neo-Nazism. More than 11,500 soldiers participated in the parade, and the number of military equipment presented was impressive. Tanks, hypersonic missiles, combat drones, and other weapons being actively used in Ukraine crossed the Red Square. But what really caught the eye was the presence of representatives from other countries, such as China, who sent their troops, and North Korea, which was also present, demonstrating the narrowing of alliances between these countries and Russia, especially in a moment of isolation imposed by Western sanctions. Russia, let's go deeper into the 2025 parade, amid the Ukraine war, has become a crucial point for building a geopolitical narrative and international alliances. The presence of allies like China, North Korea and Iran was not by chance, but a clear message that Russia seeks, with these countries, to create a new multipolar world order. One of the great messages transmitted by the 2025 parade was the strengthening of alliances between Russia and powers that, like her, do not share the same democratic and economic values as the West. The presence of Xi Jinping, President of China, was one of the most striking points of the event, reflecting the narrowing of relations between the two countries. China, under the leadership of Xi Jinping, has been an important ally for Russia, especially in times of growing diplomatic isolation by the West. Both countries have common interests in challenging U.S. hegemony and build a new global balance. In addition, the economic and military partnership between Russia and China has been fundamental for Russia to overcome the sanctions imposed by the international community. The parade in 2025 served to reinforce this partnership and show the world that Moscow is not alone in the fight against the West. In addition to China, the presence of troops from North Korea and Iran was also indicative of tie narrowing with countries that share the vision of a multipolar order. Iran, for example, is a strategic ally of Russia in the Middle East, especially due to its opposition to U.S. military power and its partnership on several fronts, including Syria. North Korea, in turn, has been a constant presence in the Asian geopolitical scenario, with its authoritarian government aligned with Moscow in many ways, including support for resistance against Western sanctions. These alliances, often ignored or minimized by the West, play a crucial role in Putin's strategy. Not only do they provide military and political support, but also help build an alternative narrative on that imposed by Western media, which often paints Russia as an isolated and aggressor nation. The 2025 parade was a clear attempt to show that Russia has friends and allies around the world, and that its position on the global scenario is far from fragile. In addition to the external messages, the Victory Day parade also fulfills an important role in strengthening internal support to the Putin government. Russia is facing huge challenges in the war in Ukraine, with high human and economic costs. The Russian government has been trying to shape public perception, painting the invasion of Ukraine as a struggle against neo-Nazism and the Western existential threat to Russian sovereignty. In incorporating narratives of resistance and victory throughout the parade, Putin tries to maintain the morale of the population. The images of tanks and missiles parading through the Red Square are a way of reminding the Russian citizens of the country's military force, even in times of difficulty. And the presence of allies like China and Iran serves to reinforce the idea that Russia is somehow in a fair war and supported by other powers that also see themselves as a target of Western pressure. In addition, the parade also serves as a platform for building a nationalist narrative that goes beyond the war in Ukraine. Victory Day has a huge emotional charge for Russians, being a reminder of the heroism of their ancestors during World War II. By binding on the fight against the Nazis with today's war, Putin is trying to create a parallelism between what many see as a legitimate resistance in the past and the resistance that the Russian government claims to be locking against the West and Ukraine. The constant reference to the struggle against neo-Nazism serves as a powerful internal propaganda strategy. By painting the Ukrainians and their Western allies as Nazis or Nazi supporters, Putin tries not only to justify their actions militarily, but also creating a clear enemy that mobilizes patriotism and the support of the population. Although the parade has been a great demonstration of strength and an attempt to consolidate both internal and external support, the reality of war in Ukraine cannot be ignored. More than 2 years of conflict and no decisive advance. Russia has faced huge difficulties in gaining significant territory, and human, economic, and military costs are immense. In 2025, Russia continues to lose soldiers and resources, while Ukraine, with the support of Western powers, maintains a fierce resistance. Despite the powerful images of the parade and the promises of greatness, reality on the battlefield is much more complex. The lack of a decisive victory in Ukrainian soil calls into question the effectiveness of Putin's military strategy. And while the parade tries to give an image of strength, the reality of thousands of dead and the growing dissatisfaction of the Russian population with the costs of war are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. War propaganda, although effective in the short term, may not be sufficient to mask the real costs of the invasion, especially if the war continues without a clear outcome. Now we analyze the role of international alliances and the impact of the 2025 parade in Russia internally. It is time to look closely as this event and the war in Ukraine insert themselves into Putin's strategy to reconfigure the world order. The 2025 parade was not just a matter of displaying military power, but a strategic move to strengthen Russia's ties with its allies and challenge the world order dominated by the United States and NATO. The idea of a new multipolar order has been a pillar of Russian foreign policy in recent years. Unlike a US unipolar world, Putin seeks to promote a model in which several regional powers, including Russia, China, India, and other countries, have significant influence on global decisions. The 2025 parade was a clear demonstration of this view. Including allies like China, Iran, and North Korea, Putin is not only strengthening regional alliances, but also sending a clear message: Russia is not alone. The presence of Xi Jinping in the parade was emblematic, symbolizing a growing strategic partnership between Moscow and Beijing, which has deepened over the past few years. The two powers share the goal of challenging the hegemony of the US and NATO, and this parade served to highlight this collaboration. Russia, with its military power and its natural resources, and China, with its growing economy and global influence, form a formidable double that can compete directly with the West. In addition, the growing alliance with Iran is also an attempt to challenge the West, especially in the Middle East affairs. Relations between Moscow and Tehran have been strengthened, and this has been reflected in joint actions in countries such as Syria, where both countries support Bashar al-Assad regime. Including Iranian troops in the parade, Putin reaffirms the importance of this strategic alliance, especially with the growing US pressure on Iran. But this multipolar view is not just about strategic alliances. It also reflects a reconfiguration of global institutions. Russia, along with its allies, has sought to challenge the Western-dominated financial institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank, promoting alternatives that favor the interests of these countries. In addition, Russia has been working to strengthen the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, and other international organizations that promote a more decentralized and less dependent global governance model of the US-led system. The growing approximation between Russia and China, as well as the strengthening of relations with Iran and North Korea, have generated a growing reaction in the West. For the US and its allies, the construction of a new multipolar world order represents a direct threat to the status quo, which is based on the US leadership and the predominance of NATO. The US-led West has reacted with economic sanctions and military support to Ukraine in an attempt to undermine Putin's ability to consolidate his alliances and expand his influence. However, this strategy has been complicated by a number of factors. On the one hand, Russia has been resilient, and sanctions have failed to weaken the country decisively. On the other hand, Western support to Ukraine has generated a climbing in the conflict, making the war increasingly difficult to resolve. The challenge for the West is that the alliances between Russia and China are deeper than ever, and the alternatives offered by these countries, such as BRICS and other coalitions, are attracting more and more countries, especially those in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, who seek to diversify their international relations. The presence of leaders such as Brazilian President Lula in the 2025 parade also illustrates this movement. Brazil, a regional power, has been a critical voice against US policies, and approaching Russia and China may have significant repercussions on global politics. The impact of these new alliances cannot be underestimated. If Russia and China continue to expand its influence, especially with the support of countries such as Iran and North Korea, the West can see its dominance over international institutions, such as the United Nations and global financial organizations, being challenged more significantly. Although the 2025 parade was a demonstration of strength, the war in Ukraine remains the great point of tension for Putin. Despite the great military stops and the promises of victory, Russia failed to achieve a decisive victory and faces growing difficulties. Western support to Ukraine, especially in terms of weapons and financial assistance, has been a critical factor in the country's resistance. The question that arises is, how long can Russia support this war with the growing human and economic cost? The 2025 parade, with its grandeur, does not hide the reality that Russia has not yet been able to guarantee the victory that Putin and its allies expected. And, more importantly, the The presence of allies in the parade does not necessarily mean that these countries will be willing to support Russia indefinitely if the war is further prolonged. On the other hand, Russia has shown its ability to adapt and resistance, and the support of strategic allies can help you withstand the difficulties of a prolonged war. The challenge for Putin will be to balance the cost of war with the benefits of new alliances, without internal and external pressure cause a deeper crisis. The 2025 parade on Victory Day was much more than a simple display of military power. It was a multifaceted strategy to reinforce Russia's position on the global scenario, show its military strength, strengthen alliances with powers such as China, Iran, and North Korea, and challenge the US and NATO-dominated world order. At the same time, he highlighted Russia's difficulties in the war in Ukraine and the need to build a narrative that justifies his actions both internally and externally. The future of Russia, its alliances and war in Ukraine will depend on how Putin will manage these factors. The 2025 parade has served as a reminder that Russia is determined to maintain its position on the global stage, even if it involves significant challenges. The impact of this new balance of power will be felt for many years, and the struggle for leadership in the new multipolar world order is just beginning.